Good morning. My name is Liz Bear, and it's my privilege to serve as your worship associate today. We come together in community, supporting and encouraging each other on our spiritual journeys, affirming the importance not only of tolerance, but of acceptance, compassion, and open-mindedness. We are a liberal, progressive congregation, open to those who share our values of free thought and lifelong learning. We welcome you without regard to race, creed, age, economic status, physical ability, gender expression, or sexual orientation. These are some of the categories that have divided rather than united people of faith. We do not require that you believe the same as we. Indeed, here you will find many different paths. Welcome to this good place, Tapestry, a Unitarian Universalist congregation. I think the biggest joy in my life has been watching our 3 children grow. Because it was hard for us to get pregnant, although we finally did after 5 years, we felt such an amazing sense of joy and delight when our children were born, and a bit unprepared. It's such a responsibility. How can you physically take care of them? And then, as they grow, what questions they ask. How much can you love? Why do kids at school say purple is a girl's color? But he hit me first. Why do I have to say sorry for my words? Coming to Tapestry has been a place of communion and learning for our kids. Grace and Noah and Abby have all been dedicated here by 2 ministers and 1 rabbi. They've loved attending camp in the mountains and participated in the Our Whole Lives program, an age-appropriate human relations and sexuality class that is one of the more profound intergenerational experiences I have had. Yes, me. Sure, the kids benefited from the classes, but Jeff and I learned too. Jeff has been one of the volunteer teachers, and we have both learned how to have those inarticulate speeches of the heart. My head is very liberal, but before the classes, I had a hard time to have open, honest discussions. The OWL classes gave a common language and a respectful way for us to talk as a family. Abby, a 14-year-old, recently described OWL as informative, fun, educational, and eye-opening. Both she and Grayson have discovered Chalaka, another UU tradition. It's very interesting as a parent to be open to things that the children learn, because I've grown too. As adolescents and young adults, the 3 of them are self-aware, educated, and able to communicate with others to a degree that never would have happened without the community here. As a parent, life is busy, full, fun, exhausting, and often perplexing. Being a part of Tapestry has helped our family be more appreciative of not only our bodies, but also how to learn, talk, and connect with one another. Now, would you please take a moment to turn off mobile phones or other devices that might be disruptive to our worship time together? Feel free to check in on Facebook first before you silence them. And also, to help maintain a contemplative atmosphere, please hold your applause until after the postlude is finished and the service is completed. Assisted listening devices are available every Sunday. If a listening device would be helpful for you, please see the person in the audio booth before the service. We are a warm and welcoming congregation, and we extend a warm greeting to any newcomers. It's great to see everyone connecting with each other. We have lots of seats in the front for those of you standing in the back. Come on up. You can continue your conversations over refreshments after the service. We have some exciting events coming up at Tapestry. Okay, we're in a festive mood. You may have noticed as you came in, we've got the holiday boutique right after this service, and we also have soup and salad will be available for $10 a person, $5 for kids. So be sure and stay after and pick up last-minute items. We also have the Christmas Eve service is Christmas Eve at 5:30, so you can come here for the candlelight service. It's always wonderful. You can find information and other events in your program. Our various groups and events reflect our vision of being a transformational home for liberal spirituality and a dynamic community leader in Orange County and beyond. And now I'm going to invite my sister to light the chalice. Jen is visiting from New York, many of you know her. We light our flaming chalice, the central symbol of our Unitarian Universalist heritage. Each morning we must hold out the chalice of our being to receive, to carry and give back. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to the community, and to each other.
I invite you to stop for just a minute and listen. Do you hear the breathing of your neighbor and the shifting and settling of bodies into seats? Stop and look around for just a moment. Do you see the glorious bodies in this room? These people have come here to sit by your side, to be here together with you. Stop and notice your own body for a minute. Perhaps a little achy, perhaps a little tense, perhaps relaxed and embracing the Sabbath, or maybe still buzzed from caffeine. Thank you for sharing the gift of your presence with Tapestry today. Because you are here, we are ready to worship together. As we gather on worship on Sundays, we lift up the sorrows and celebrations that shape our lives, not just the ideas of old, ancient folks, but our lives here and now. Some of us do that by lighting a candle in silent recognition of our lives and those we care about, and some write messages. I'd like to invite our young and young at heart to come join us on the carpet to hear a story and meet a new friend.
Good morning. How's everybody today? Good. All right. So some of you might know that I'm pregnant. I don't know. You might have noticed. I'm going to have a little girl in a couple weeks. So today is my last Sunday, but you guys are lucky because while I'm gone, Karen will be here. Can you guys say good morning, Karen? Good morning, Karen. All right. So we have a book today about welcoming new friends. All right. It's called Chester's Way. All right. And you were going to hold it. Chester had a way of doing things. Hello, my name is Chester. I like croquet and peanut butter and making my bed.
I can see.
You can't see? Why don't you sit right here, sweetie?
Yeah.
He always cut his sandwiches diagonally. He always got out of bed on the same side. And he never left the house without double knotting his shoes.
Chester always had the same thing for breakfast. Toast with jam and peanut butter. And he always carried a miniature first aid kit in his back pocket, just in case. You definitely have a mind of your own, said Chester's mother. That's one way to put it, said Chester's father.
Chester's best friend Wilson was exactly the same way. That's why they were best friends. Chester wouldn't play baseball unless Wilson played, and they never swung at the first pitch or slid head first. Wilson wouldn't ride his bike unless Chester wanted to, and they always used hand signals.
If Chester was hungry, Wilson was too, but they rarely ate between meals. Some days I can't tell those two apart, said Wilson's mother. Me either, said Wilson's father.
Chester and Wilson, Wilson and Chester. That's the way it was. And then Lily moved into the neighborhood.
I'm Lily. I am the queen. I like everything. Lily had her own way of doing things.
She wore Band-Aids all over her arms and legs to look brave. She talked backwards to herself sometimes so no one would know what she was saying. And she never left the house without one of her nifty disguises.
Lily waved at all the cars that passed by, even if she didn't know who was in them. And she always carried a loaded squirt gun in her back pocket, just in case. She definitely has a mind of her own, said Chester. That's one way to put it, said Wilson.
When Lily asked Chester and Wilson to play, they said they were busy. When she called them up on the phone, they disguised their voices and said they weren't home.
Very nice. If Lily was walking on one side of the street, Chester and Wilson crossed to the other side. She's something else, said Chester. Looks like it, says Wilson.
One day, while Chester and Wilson were practicing their hand signals, some other boys rode by, popping wheelies. They circled Chester and Wilson and yelled personal remarks.
Chester and Wilson didn't know what to do. Just when they were about to give up hope, a fierce-looking cat with the horrible fangs jumped out of the bushes and frightened the older boys away.
Are you who I think you are? Chester asked the cat. Of course, the cat replied.
Thank you, Lily, said Chester. You're welcome, Chester, said Lily. Thank you, Lily, said Wilson. You're welcome, Wilson, said Lily. I'm glad you were wearing a disguise, said Chester. And I'm glad you had your squirt gun, said Wilson. I always do, just in case.
Afterward, Chester invited Lily over for lunch. You have a Muscle Mouse cup, said Lily. Of course, said Chester. I do too, said Lily. Same here, said Wilson. Chester and Wilson cut their sandwiches diagonally. Lily asked Chester's mother if she had cookie cutters, and she made stars and flowers and bells. That's neat, said Chester. Wow, said Wilson.
That night, Lily invited Chester and Wilson to sleep over. You have a nightlight? Said Chester. Of course, said Lily. I have one too, said Chester. Same here, said Wilson. Chester and Wilson wanted toast with jam and peanut butter for breakfast the next morning. Boring, said Lily. Try this instead. This is good, said Chester. Wow, said Wilson.
After that, when Lily asked Chester and Wilson to play, they said yes. When she called them up on the phone, they had pleasant conversation. And if Lily was walking on one side of the street, Chester and Wilson waved and ran to catch up with her.
Chester and Wilson taught Lily hand signals, and she taught them how to pop wheelies. Lily taught Chester and Wilson how to talk backwards, and they taught her how to double knot her shoes.
Some days I can't tell those three apart, said Lily's mother. Me either, said Lily's father. Chester and Wilson, Wilson and Lily, Lily and Wilson and Chester. That's the way it was.
And then Victor moved into the neighborhood. So that is our story. Lily taught them lots of new things. It's good to make new friends. Oh, we are going to go to our classes, guys.
So this morning, our reading comes out of this may look somewhat like our hymn supplement. It's actually a reading supplement that we don't have yet. So we're going to do the responsive reading together as a joint reading. I picked this reading because it's by Christian de la Huerta. He was a spiritual leader for the gay community in the early 1990s, helping people overcome shame of their body and fear of their bodies, really, in the wake of the worst of the AIDS crisis. So that's a little bit of the background where this is coming from. We must shine.
We must shine now,
This is the goal toward which we stretch.
step by step.
In our own time, at our own pace,
As our beauty unfolds and our hearts open,
we become gentler and more compassionate.
yet brighter, more empowered, and fearless.
We've been holding on, holding back.
Playing small, hiding our light under a bushel.
Enough of that.
It is time to let go.
We are needed now, all of us.
All of us together.
All those who feel a calling to be who we are to the fullest, make a difference, to give it all we got. I'd like to invite you to sit back, relax for our time of meditation. Take a few deep breaths and feel the embrace of this community here together. It's always interesting coming in on Sunday morning, and there's a different energy every Sunday morning. This has definitely been a festive day, as you put it. That was nice to see. I found myself actually embracing the holiday festivities a little more than usual this year. We sang Christmas carols for a solid 3 hours last night at Cheryl's home. I'm even listening to Christmas carols at home, and that is not my usual December habit, but it's been fun this year. One of my favorite carols, I think, is O Come, Emmanuel. I love the sort of haunting melody of it, but I also like the song because the idea of Emmanuel, to me, is the best description of, well, at least the description that I can embrace, of the theology behind Christmas. Emmanuel is a Hebrew word that means God with us. Now, the author of the Gospel of Matthew cited a passage of Isaiah as part of a prophecy of God's protection from a rival king. I could go on and on about why the Gospel of Matthew was using Isaiah, but that gets really tedious, so I'm not going to. Suffice it to say, he chose the description Emmanuel, God with us, to describe the birth of a child. To me, that word, Emmanuel, is the most helpful description of the Christmas story. It's a reminder that the divine is born into flesh and bone, into human bodies. Emmanuel is to me a reminder of the sacred being embodied in a teacher, in a friend, a brother, a sister, a neighbor, maybe even an enemy. And this sacredness of human bodies is what I want to talk about today. Too often in our Western world, we separate our physical bodies from spirits, or we separate our physical bodies from our minds. We think of our core as the ideas and beliefs that we have instead of these bodies that we carry around. You might think of your mind or soul as some sort of puppet master and the body as the puppet. But that separation was foreign to that Jewish community that spoke of Emmanuel. The earliest followers of Jesus and the ones who first heard the stories about him were Jewish. They held a really integrated understanding of the person. Instead of seeing the body as just a vessel for the soul, they understood the person as a whole integrated unit. Emmanuel, God with us in flesh and blood, in a whole and holy physical body. We Unitarian Universalists don't believe in the miracles of the virgin birth, the wise men, and a lot of the details of this wonderful ancient story. We do, however, embrace the sacredness of every human person. We believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every single person, not in a theoretical way. We don't just believe their mind or their spirit is special. We support the worth and dignity of each whole person, mind and body. And I know this talk about body and soul sounds very theoretical, but it's also practical. This past week, a tremendously influential man died, a man who deeply impacted higher education in America. Walter J. Leonard was a prominent administrator in higher education. Most notably, he was the chief architect of Harvard University's admissions process that allowed for affirmative action. His formula survived 4 decades of constitutional challenges. And because his formula was so strong, admissions offices in other universities across the country replicated his formula for their school. He arguably opened the door for more minority and female students than any other education administrator in the United States. I want to lift him up as a hero, and I also want to lift him up for his awareness that whole people matter, not just their brains or their minds. The affirmative action formula that Dr. Leonard designed for Harvard allowed recruiters to take into account race and ethnicity on a case-by-case basis as one of the many factors to consider as they sought to assemble a diverse student body. This is still the way affirmative action operates. It sees an individual's life experience, including their race, class, gender, as a resource from which they draw to inform their perspective. Affirmative action sees an individual's life experience, including race, class, and gender, and other factors, as a resource from which to draw to inform a perspective. Affirmative action is not a handout for the disadvantaged. It's the recognition that the total life experiences, including the way we experience the world through our particular bodies, is an asset. The best learning environments aim higher than just memorizing and absorbing information, particularly in college. The best learning environments invite learners to exchange ideas with one another and think through solutions together. Affirmative action is an invaluable tool for building the richest learning environments possible by bringing students with a variety of perspectives into the same classroom. It recognizes that the perspectives that come along with living in various bodies matters. Lived experience can't be replaced with memorized facts. Affirmative action isn't a tool for displacing white students. It's a tool for building the best learning environments possible. Schools that want a great learning environment recruit students whose bodies give them diverse perspectives. And competitive companies do the same thing. They realize that the strongest team for solving problems is a team with diverse skills, experiences, and perspectives. The bodies that we live in shape our experience and perspective. So if you want a team of diverse perspectives, you want a team of diverse bodies working together. Affirmative action, welcoming women and people of color into institutions of power, is not a handout. Recognizing difference and being honest about bodies in which people live is just a piece of building productive and strong communities. I told you this body and mind split had practical implications. A small group of us here at Tapestry have been talking a bit about systemic racism and racial identity and multiculturalism. In this nearly all-white group, the question comes up from time to time, What can we do? We know about these things from reading books, but what can we do in South Orange County, in our white neighborhood with our white friends? What can we do to better understand and dismantle the systems of racial oppression that we inherit? And there's a deep and genuine yearning for relationships in this group. Reading is a great place to start, but transformational learning emerges out of relationships, out of sitting next to someone, hearing the tone of their voice as they speak of their experience, seeing their body posture as they sit with you, and noticing your own body as it sits with them. Proximity is really important to learning and caring about people whose lives are different from our own. Now, this group at Tapestry seems to long for more diverse relationships. And one of our group members recounted the words of Unitarian minister Reverend Rosemary Bray McNatt. At a General Assembly workshop, probably a couple of years ago, a white person asked Rosemary the question, "How can I get to know more people of color?" She paused and asked back, "What choices have you made with your life that so thoroughly isolated you from people who are different?" Too often we expect proximity to just happen. We expect the other to come to us. Too often we forget that building new relationships takes more than opening our minds or opening our doors to welcome the other in. Building relationships requires us to step through those doors sometimes, to journey out into the world. Because our bodies matter. Showing up in the world matters. In two different moments recently, really in the past couple of months, I learned again about the power of showing up. The first was a little over a month ago. About 5 of us from Tapestry met with members of Our Lady of Guadalupe Catholic Church in Santa Ana. Our meeting was sort of an outgrowth of the Green Sanctuary program, and the team was looking for an environmental justice project. A project so we could partner with the people most impacted by environmental degradation. So we met with members of this other church to talk face-to-face about the environmental issues that were impacting each of our communities. What Mission Viejo looked like, smelt like, felt like, what Santa Ana looked like and smelt like and felt like. And we shared tips about home gardening and water conservation. We learned about the history of the Delhi neighborhood where they lived. We talked about the environment in North Orange County. Lots of manufacturing there and high population density had made things really nasty, honestly. We got to know each other really well, really quickly in a short meeting. Near the end of our meeting, one of the women there began to thank us for coming. She had been a community activist there for a long time with her husband. She and her husband had made some really significant improvements in their neighborhood. As she thanked us for coming, she began to tear up. She was so moved by a group of white folks from South Orange County that came to learn about life in Santa Ana that she literally began to cry. That's an uncomfortable story. The intensity of her gratitude caught all of us from Tapestry a little bit off guard. We just went there for a dinner meeting with a potential partner in a project. But for them, white people from South Orange County hadn't reached out that way before. Honestly, it made me ashamed to know that that community felt so alone in its challenges. It was also a startling reminder of how important it is for us to show up in person. It was slightly inconvenient to make that 30-minute drive, to spend a couple of hours on a Saturday. But the impact was much different than I expected. This could never have been accomplished from reading about the situation or even talking to these same people on the phone. We needed to break bread together and to hear one another's stories face to face. I don't know where I heard this said. I'm not sure if it was a minister or an activist or a parent, but they said, "You can pretend to care, but you can't pretend to show up." I have found this to be incredibly true. You can pretend to care, but you can't pretend to show up. Showing up is different from reading about it or voting for it or sending money to fix the problem. It's an irreplaceable human connection. So the other powerful reminder that I had this month about showing up came in a rushed phone call on December 10th, when the media released the name of the San Bernardino shooter. The Muslim community became very worried. They feared, and rightfully so, that following the terrorism in San Bernardino, that there would be backlash against the Muslim community. So the organization called CARE, that's the Council on American Islamic Relations, hosted a press conference. The key speakers were the executive director of CARE and a brother-in-law of one of the shooters. They both expressed their sadness for the loss of life and a rejection of the violence that occurred. And they tried to explain that terrorism is not a reflection of true Islam. They also wanted other faith leaders to stand in solidarity with the Muslim community. So they called me at 7:30 p.m. to come to a press conference in Santa Ana that would start at 8:30 p.m. I was brushing my dog in my sweatpants, about to clean my apartment, when I received this call. Knowing that this would be about a 3-hour commitment that would throw off my schedule, I tried to think of other UU ministers who were close. But as I went through my mental Rolodex, I quickly realized that if I didn't show up, no one else would either. If I didn't go, then there would not be a Unitarian there. It was time to put on a suit and think of something to say in the wake of tragedy. Thinking of myself and my own little weekly schedule, at first I was annoyed. Eventually, though, I realized that they called me at home because I had shown up before. Staff members at CARE knew me from participating in political actions earlier this year. They knew that I would show up. They had my cell phone number, and they were calling me to stand with them in a time of really deep worry. I didn't even realize until I got there, how scared they were. The request that began as an annoyance transformed into an honor. They didn't want my money or my prayers. They didn't want me to advertise their event on Facebook. They wanted me there to stand with them as they prepared for a waterfall of xenophobia and intolerance. Being there is important. Our presence is often the best gift that we can give. After all, we each bring inherent worth and dignity wherever we go, not in some abstract theoretical way. Our whole person is sacred, our mind and our bodies. If perhaps you're looking for something very different to do on Christmas Day this year, you might consider attending prayer services across the street at the Orange County Islamic Foundation. I know a few of our members are going. Their service is at 1 p.m., as it happens every Friday. You don't have to do anything in particular, just show up, participate, enjoy a great meal afterwards, and say you're there because you want to reach out to your neighbor. Or if you're trekking off to visit relatives, or if you're preparing your home for relatives to visit you, remember that your being there in person is irreplaceable. This is where Christmas leaves me this year. This is where Emmanuel and the idea of communion leave me. With a deep awareness that our bodies matter, being together in close proximity is essential for relationship and deep learning. So in this season of Christmas, when Christians celebrate a moment God was born as a human being, a teacher, a friend, a neighbor, let us join in remembering that our bodies too are whole and holy. Let us remember that our presence is the best gift that we can give. Amen.
We extinguish this flame, knowing the light remains in the warmth and compassion of our hearts until we are together again.
I want you to do something different. Look at your hands for just a moment. These are the same hands that wrote your name for the first time. These are the hands that have prepared meals for loved ones and have nurtured the sick. These are the hands that you work with, the hands that you've wiped away tears with. These precious hands, which have been scraped, bent, worn down, and maybe even broken, are yet whole and holy. Now, take the hand of someone near you. May you be filled with the blessings of this covenanted community. Go in peace and let the light within you be a blessing to the world.